very, very warm welcome to our latest podcast. An absolute privilege to be here with Himal Mandalia. Apparently, the name Himal comes from the Himalayas. That sounds absolutely fantastic. And we are here at the Barbican Centre in central London. And you were telling me earlier a little bit about the history of the Barbican Centre, some really interesting history. Let's start with that.
Yeah, so the idea after World War II was this whole area, the square mile, was going to be reconstructed as a set of skywalks where pedestrians wouldn't walk at surface level. So you just have vehicles, and you'd be able to go from Liverpool Street to Blackfriars all the way across without touching the ground.
Wow!
And when you're here in the Barbican Centre and you walk up along some of the walkways up there, they've got street signs. They're actually streets, but it's not at street level. And I think it's kind of this strange sort of 60s retro future vision. You can imagine this, like the 60s sort of vision of a utopian technological future with cars sort of going on the ground and people walking on skywalks. There's a glimpse of that you get in Barbican with the brutalist architecture and all of that. Or maybe slightly dystopian vibes with the sort of Judge Dredd type, if you look at those comics on the blocks there. But
Wow.
It's a really interesting place to be.
You heard it here first, a history lesson for Central London. So, Himal, you were talking to me a few months ago about your life journey, your career journey, and apparently you spent some time in tech, in IT, working for the government. You're really keen on leadership and servant leadership and developing people, but also you've been on an incredible journey learning about yourself. And that's really what I want us to talk about on the podcast today. But tell us a little bit about you. Just give us an insight.
So I've had a very unconventional route through to, I guess, what I would call a career. I came in through technology as a developer, as a software engineer, sort of self-organizing teams working in agile environments. But I didn't start until much later. So I was held back by a lot of things. So a lot of my 20s spent long periods of unemployment or doing odd jobs here and there in retail. But I'd been coding since I was 11 and doing quite a lot of other things. But I dropped out of school, I hadn't finished university, and I had a lot of self-esteem and confidence issues which prevented me from even trying. That fear of rejection was even greater than any possible benefit from being able to move forward in life. So I held myself back until finally in my early 30s, around 32, I decided, well, it's almost sort of like a do or die. You're either going to move forward with your life or you're not. You're not going to get anywhere. And I was very surprised at the results from just putting samples of my work out there, work I'd done that I hadn't been paid for, work I'd done that had been used at big events like Wimbledon and London Fashion Week, just through friends that happened to work at companies that had given me a chance to provide some solutions. And what had happened was I'd become the equivalent of a multidisciplinary team. So I'd gone into places, I'd done user research, service design, I'd written bits of code, put things live, seen them used, seen what worked and what didn't work, chopped and changed things around until something was refined, all on a purely voluntary basis. I didn't really have any way of gauging how good any of that was, but when I put samples of that out there and started going for jobs, I had a ton of offers within the first week of that happening. And within 2 weeks, I was working in a content marketing agency around Soho. And a year after that, based on 4 contractors telling me, you're better than us, why are you not a contractor? And I really liked the idea of the flexibility. I tripled my income. And a few months after that, I moved into government digital. So they were just trying to start. What the government digital service had done with gov.uk was ramping up the Ministry of Justice around 2013, 2014.
So before the pandemic?
Yeah, well before the pandemic, yeah. So I got to come into that in the early days of government digital when it was spreading from what had started at GDS, the government digital service, to other departments. And it's very unevenly distributed in terms of how well it was done in some places versus others. There's a lot of constraints around capability, the kind of people you can bring in, the kind of people you can keep, people you can recruit permanent, contractor. I was brought in as a contractor, and And yeah, and this saw me sort of fall into various different roles, move teams, and then before long I was involved in the architecture of how systems are created and how they fit together, so not just the code. But I'd also escaped having to work through any sort of corporate environments that have functional teams, which is just in a team of one type, or in any environments where you had any real feeling of hierarchy. So I was in self-organizing teams where we got to determine what worked for us. So for our team, maybe these days of the week are good for working from home, or we do team lunches on this other day. It could be completely different from another team. And as a contractor, there was even less of a need for line management. So it was purely just about the work. And as someone that has a real focus and passion of details and work and problem solving, that's great, because I'm being paid money to do things how I want to do those things, working with other talented people, user researchers, designers. And so at a team level, it was amazing. We were delivering services for how legal aid caseworkers might process claims, how solicitors may be able to submit claims for defense work they've done, and then services to improve the lives of prison officers, for managing their workload, just across the ministry, and a lot of services that were public facing as well, to really help people out there in the world figure out how to do prison visits bookings, or just so many other problems that they have to deal with that are usually designed with an upfront approach of that's it, that's locked in, and that's really going to change now. And you've got a long-lived team that's sitting there that's actually working with the users, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, and being able to change that. And it's great to be part of that feedback loop. For someone that's put something out, and in the space of a few days or a few weeks, you've seen how people have interacted with that. Has that worked for them? Has it not? You can change that around. And then I moved more into a sort of higher level, big picture, technical architecture, and then beyond that into people, ways of working, and culture problems, because the technology side itself is interesting. I coded since I was 11, and I like technology, but I also like to bake sourdough bread and 57 other things. So,
because we're all human, right?
Right. Right. So I don't like to be defined purely as a technologist. I mean, I don't think I would even call myself a technologist at all anymore.
What would you call yourself? How would you describe yourself to the viewers of the show?
Yeah, so, reinvention is very much where I'm at right now. So I've been thinking a lot about this, and I've been playing with some things on my LinkedIn, updating my profile and my tagline. In the broadest sense, I think of myself as a systems thinker, someone that's interested in systems, people, and culture, and how to bring about change to make those better.
Okay.
Right.
So improving the systems, improving the people, developing the culture as a result.
Right.
Kind of the link between those three things.
Right.
That's really interesting.
Right. And along with that, you have structures, you have ways of working, you have things like safety, psychological safety, but then that overlaps into modes of leadership, like servant leadership. It can also overlap into neurodivergence, where you have hypersensitivity, hypervigilance, how that plays out, how certain people can be the sort of canaries in the coal mine of your organization. In a healthy organization, they might actually be a tremendous asset, or they may be people that are just very overwhelmed and triggering into fight or flight mode. So I'm really interested in looking at the psychology of organizations and how the internal nervous system state of leadership, of the leadership can be sort of almost represented in the organizational culture.
Okay.
Like you could almost feel that palpably in some places. And you go in somewhere, and I have, as a contractor, gone into places, when I move sort of beyond purely technology, I've gone into places and I've wondered why is this so quiet, or why is this such a febrile environment, or such a guarded, cautious environment. And I've spoken to a few people, and then I've spoken to leadership, and I've this organization looks like the inside of these people's heads.
Okay, interesting. So that's quite deep thinking for a technology coding guru, if you allow me to use that phrase. That's quite a shift from tech-focused consultant into leadership development. You talked about servant leadership, which I want to pick up again in a little bit. What sort of has prompted you to kind of move into that space and kind of develop your thoughts and ambitions in that area? I think you said to me you've had a break of some time, but you didn't really call it a break. I was really interested in the way you kind of articulated that. So tell us a bit about it.
So I think it was, a few years into working. So I did maybe about 2 or 3 years working with teams, working directly with software, writing code in multidisciplinary teams, and then finding that a lot of the problems I was trying to solve were not actually technological in nature. They were more people and ways of working related.
Okay.
Blockers around, we can't put this thing live, or we can't keep running it because of, there's budgets, there's people, there's the way an area is structured. And I'm realizing none of this is about technology. Or going places and finding maybe there's what's termed as legacy technology. Sure, there's a problem to solve there around moving something from something that's antiquated to something more modern, but hang on, none of this is going to work if the way these people are operating, if they're working, the way they're thinking about it, all this, if that doesn't evolve, none of that's going to change. And so, as somebody that started on this sort of career late, I mean, I'd say my work as a technologist was all of about 3 or 4 years of my life.
Okay.
Right. So I've coded since I was 11, and I've been paid money to do technology work for about 3 or 4 years. I mean, that's how I count it. Because beyond that, I moved into a contract role at another government department. So I was at the Ministry of Justice, and I finished off there in a role over prisons and probation as a sort of technical oversight, sort of on behalf of the CTO, who was very stretched. Moving from hands-on work to technical sort of systems design and troubleshooting technical architecture to more sort of oversight, but this wasn't technical in nature. It was big consultancy, failed to deliver a program, £50 million, what have we got? I'm realizing that all the questions I'm asking in rooms, or all the information I'm trying to pull together to report up to the CTO, none of it has anything to do with technology. And so I'm sitting at home cramming the equivalent of an MBA into my head because I want to really understand what is going on here, and who's telling me the truth, and who's distorting some of the truth here. And then beyond that, I moved into another department where they were trying to do a lot of the culture work of self-organizing teams and delivering value directly to users, and using those experimental test and learn approaches, right? And working in that sort of way relies a lot more on having leadership that's more like a coach than someone that's actively managing or micromanaging people. It's having a level of trust where you're letting the people closest to the problem get on with figuring out how they're going to solve that problem, and even letting them choose the kind of tools they're going to use. And a lot of these organizations are not set up to handle that kind of risk. So they're set up to be fairly uniform. And so to get a pocket of an organization working in a different way to the rest of that is a bit of a culture clash. And you've got a pocket of an organization that's buying, well, let's say they're buying MacBooks on credit cards because they can't use the lockdown devices that are designed to do office work by the other staff. You have a lot of internal fighting that happens as a result. And so I'm in a place where I'm learning a different set of skills, and I'm navigating internal politics, bureaucracy, how to game business cases, and procurement just to make happen what this particular leader wants to make happen, because they need to push through this approach, but the organization they exist in isn't set up for that. And so that's teaching me a lot about systems change and culture. But what I'm not doing is taking care of myself during all of that. So I'm operating with a great deal of anxiety. So I've suddenly got first world problems of, if I just wanted work and to be paid a handsome day rate, I could just go anywhere and get that. But instead, what I want is to learn, and I'm on a crusade because I'm very fixated on a set of beliefs around how I think these things should be delivered for the human beings that we're trying to help. And I cannot back down on that, but I don't have the authority to see that through. And so I'm putting myself in positions where I feel very exposed and unguarded. And as a contractor, I don't have the sort of support around me that I would in an organization where where I'd have that someone has that duty of care. And I push myself to the point of burnout, and then I take a permanent role. So I take a 60% pay cut during the pandemic, thinking maybe I can make a difference from the inside. And I take the head of technology role for gov.uk. And that job title has technology in it, but I don't get to do any technology because I have 50 fantastically talented people under me that do technology very well. And gov.uk is run in-house by these really talented people.
So much more of a leadership role,
Right.
rather than a technological kind of focus.
Right. So it's a responsibility over critical national infrastructure. So you've got people trying to hack it. You've got a whole host of other problems that can happen with that. So there's
At a particularly difficult time for the country as well.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I think around November 2021, if I remember correctly, there was a last-minute change in lockdown rule changes, and I think around 8 p.m. one evening, something like 4 million users or more hit gov.uk all at the same moment, at the same time, and it's down to the engineering talents of the people that are responsible for running that. It didn't go down. And when there have been outages, there was a major outage while I was there. That's because of external components or service providers that we rely on. So there's a content delivery network that went down, and it took down Amazon, it took down the BBC, and we were back up in about 10 minutes because we prepare for those eventualities. So it's a high pressure job to take during the pandemic, especially starting a role remotely where you don't get to meet your team. So I'm working with the senior management team on gov.uk. There's a head of product, head of delivery. There are other roles on there. I've got director and director generals above me, and eventually I've got 5 direct reports and 50 people. So there's a duty of care as well. And what I don't have is the ability to affect the kind of strategic change or to be in the conversations that I want to be in, because I've gone for a role that for me seemed like something. I mean, there's a prestige to taking a role like head of technology for gov.uk.
yeah, absolutely.
Right. But I felt confident enough, given my experience in the years prior to that this is something that I could get. And I guess the signal for me that I hadn't allowed myself the level of challenge or allowed myself a role at a grade at which I'd be able to be a part of those conversations that I wanted to be able to shape and influence was, I believe there were 50 applicants for the role, was upon getting the role and going through the 2 or 3 stages of the interview, feeling a sense of, but that it hadn't been that much of a challenge. And I did have friends that I'd worked with previously in other places who were surprised that I'd not waited for a role. If I wanted to join the civil service with the kind of stuff I'd been doing about 2 or 3 years before that, why had I not waited for a role that would allow me to affect that kind of change? It's very simple. I was scared. That was the anxiety. I didn't think I'd be able to thrive in an organization at that level of seniority, because having tried to push a lot of change through as a contractor from the outside and working with people at that level, I'd come away pretty bruised, and I thought it's better for me to work behind the scenes as an insurgent, be subversive. And there's something I've learned in the years since. There are some things in life you have to be able to face head on. You can't avoid them. You can have coping mechanisms. You can have very glib, very well thought out, very sophisticated strategies for going around things, but you need to be able to face some things head on, directly. Stand your ground. Don't flinch. Don't blink. That's something I couldn't do. I can now. it's been a journey. I've been on a break is an interesting term.
And you didn't, well, I mean, when we were talking about it, you didn't call it a break.
Yeah. So
A journey, maybe.
Right, it's a journey, right. So I call it, rather than time off, I call it time on. So
I like that.
yeah.
That's good.
For a while I was thinking about, how would this be perceived, a 3-year career break. So yeah, a break is an interesting way to think about it, because what I thought I was doing initially was I thought I was taking a break. I thought I was taking a 6-month career break. It had been a full-on decade, so sort of coming from nothing into that big break into a tech role, and then moving more into strategic roles, and then the head of technology for Gov.uk. It had been a whirlwind, and I'd really not stopped at any point during that. I had this extreme scarcity mindset about making up for lost time, need to save, need to do all of these things. But I thought, okay, I have been burnt out for quite a while. The thing you hear from a lot of people about burnout is by the time you realize you're burnt out, you've actually been burnt out already for a year or ages, right? Yeah, right. Well, I actually started that role burnt out from where I'd been. So I'd been at the Department for Education in a role contracting, and I was very burnt out. And then I took on head of technology for Gov.uk during the pandemic. It's a critical national infrastructure for 18 months, already burnt out. And I finally stepped away and I thought, I'm taking a 6-month break. There's a lot of my life I've been neglecting. There's a lifetime's worth of stuff that I have backed up here. But I'm gonna catch my breath. I'm gonna think about what I want to do.
And presumably that was affecting your health as well.
Yeah, I think it really was. Yeah, I was held together by I was running on adrenaline, and in the long term, that's not good for your health at all.
No.
Right.
Hence the waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and worrying about work and life, the universe, and everything.
Right. Well, when you're relatively young, you can kind of get away with it. But what you start seeing, and I've been speaking to a lot of people over the last year or two, is that it really starts to take a toll as you get older, because your body won't let you get away with it anymore. Yeah. You just can't. I mean, my body was still letting me get away with it, but the fact was I was completely stuck, because I was back to where I'd been 10 years before. I thought, maybe I'm never going to amount to anything, and I'm not happy, and I don't feel like I've achieved anything yet. I know a great many things, and I think I'm pretty good at a lot of things. And then 10 years later, I proved a lot of that to myself, but it still wasn't enough. And I thought, what's going on here? This is no good. And the answer doesn't lie in more work, so take a 6-month break.
So not just ambition, but just wanting more and more and more, because you felt like that was the right thing to do, what society you were expected to do.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. And there'll be more answers to why that was the case a bit later on. But I had to go on this journey. And so I'm taking a 6-month break. That's what I think. And I'm having some chats with people about going back to contracting and taking roles, and I can get paid good money to do sort of tech strategy and consulting in any number of places. And I thought, no, I'm going to take this break. And as I'm reflecting and I start writing, and I end up writing about 100,000 words of a memoir, my life, writing a book. And
how long did that take you?
Well, that was about 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
But it started
as a lot of words.
Right, it's a lot of words. But it was all wanting to come out. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to write a blog post about why I resigned. And I thought, okay, maybe I should write about why I took the role in the first place. I wasn't quite sure. So I kept writing, and about 2 weeks later I realized this is not a blog post anymore. It's going, and it keeps going. And over a few months, every day I'm writing 2 or 3 hours. And this is cathartic. It's really helping me. It's all coming out of me. So I end up with this draft of a book. That's what I've got. And I read it back, and the thing that occurs to me and upsets me is that there's an interesting anthology of sort of disconnected stories of many lives in here, because I've done so many different things through my life. But what doesn't make sense is there's no common thread for it all. None of it makes sense. None of it feels. You could lift extracts out and you could assign them to different people, and it really makes me feel like, but what's the where's the deeper purpose and meaning in my life? What am I doing anything for? And I'm interrogating myself in a way that's not how you arrive at the answers. Right. On this 6-month break, I realized I need a longer break, and I've got savings. I don't need to rush off into work anytime soon. So I pack up my life and I put everything in boxes at my mum's place. It's a council house I grew up in since I was about 11. So the boxes stacked up in there, and I fly to New Zealand and start an open-ended trip around the world, starting with places I'd always wanted to go.
And had you booked anything? I mean, did you plan it like a holiday, or was it, I'm just going to get on a plane and go and see where the world takes me? What was your...
No, I booked a bit. So a friend of a friend had sorted me out with a studio in Wellington, so I had a base for 7 weeks. So my start was locked in, but I hadn't booked the sort of day-to-day sort of thing. So I made things up a bit while I was there. I went down to Queenstown and did lots of adventures like jet boating and a helicopter up some mountains, and it was great. Right. I did a lot of driving around. But it was when I moved on from New Zealand that I realized that I have a real problem with control. I have a real need for control. I was going around Australia and then lots of Southeast Asia. I realized I can afford to leave a lot of things to the last minute. I could, if I meet a bunch of people, like I've met a bunch of people and they'd say, oh, we're going to this place next. And I'd say, well, I'm sorry, but I booked this other thing 4 weeks ago, so I can't. So what I'm able to do on the travels is I'm able to observe myself and some of those behaviors, like that need for control or not being able to allow uncertainty. And so, every week or every 2 weeks, I'm sitting in a cafe somewhere in Vietnam or in Thailand, and I'm staring at a travel planning document where if there's no lines beyond the next 3 or 4 weeks, I'm compelled to book something. So I'm spinning the globe in Google Maps, thinking, where am I going next? And I'm plotting and scheming and making plans. And then 4 weeks hence, I'm in a situation. I'm somewhere. I'm in. Maybe I'm in somewhere in Thailand, and I'm exhausted because I've been flying every week, and I'm feeling very resentful at this cruel taskmaster that keeps making me go to all these places.
Which of course is all yourself.
That's me. I've done this
just
to myself. Right. And I'm feeling guilty because I think there are people that would love to just be on a perpetual holiday like this. And I'm sort of laughing at myself thinking, am I the only person that could burn out on their career break? Right. But it's absurd. But I'm starting to notice that there's a deeper problem here. Sort of an inability to just sit still with my thoughts and feelings. There's an inability to be present. So I'm passing through these incredible places, temples and beautiful countryside, stunning vistas, and meeting lots of people and doing group tours or solo adventures, and everything is next. So I've seen more of the world, I've done more things than a lot of people I know, but I've missed most of it. That's the other joke.
None of it was about enjoying the moment, enjoying today.
Right. I ended up traveling for 18 months because once I got really into the rhythm of that and got used to just living out of a backpack and a holdall, that became my new normal. Now, it wasn't a place a week through that whole period. I had about 7 months where I had Melbourne as a base, and I thought about settling there for a while. But from there, I took other trips, but I had a more stable, more grounded sort of reality where I was volunteering in a charity shop. They call them op shops in Australia. A couple of days a week, and volunteering with a little civic tech organization that works with the state government, doing bits here and there. All those things were helping me feel grounded, and I had friends I was seeing regularly. But when I was on the road and moving around, that felt liberating, but at the same time it left me unanchored. I didn't have anywhere that I felt I belonged. But it took me about 14 months to finally come back to the UK, and when I did, I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and renting a place and so I just kept going. I had plenty of friends to catch up with around Europe, and so anything was an excuse because I had to be somewhere. I didn't really want to end up back at my mum's. I did eventually. I've been avoiding that because there's a lot of things I hadn't faced. And so the way I look at the travels, I went out into the world thinking I'm going to find the answers there. But what I did was I traveled light in terms of literal luggage, but I carried a lot more baggage with me. I carried everything with me all around the world. And I brought it right back with me because the answers I was looking for, they weren't out there, which doesn't negate any of the experiences I had. I wouldn't change any of that for the world. If I was doing any of that again, it would be a lot slower, and I couldn't just keep going like that the way I did then. But I needed to. It's part of a healing journey I was on. Very different person and a very different place now to where I was before the travels, but also during the travels. And coming back from that and stopping, it's a slow readjustment, taking longer to settle again. It was during that time I had I've been diagnosed with ADHD and autism. Autism I knew about for a long time. Just conversations with people since I was in my early 20s. I felt that described my differences quite well. Being able to see patterns and connections, quickly break things down, analyze them, distill, synthesize insights. But when we go back to what I was saying there about moving from a sort of hands-on technologist role to looking at the sort of structure of the systems to the structure of organizations and working with people, there's some very autistic traits in that can come in handy. But I don't want to paint this as autistic superpowers, because it actually is not as simple or as clear-cut as that. And this is certainly not some sort of, Rain Man sort of being a savant sort of thing. I'd been on a waiting list for an autism assessment before I'd left. So while I was doing the gov.uk role, I'd been on an NHS waiting list for a year, and they removed me because I left and I went traveling. I thought, fine. And I met people on the road that were neurodivergent, that were autistic or ADHD. We were sort of drawn to each other. I've been joking, it's a bit like in Highlander, for anyone knows the film, of you get this tingling sensation when another immortal's nearby. But yeah, it's not quite like that. We don't carry swords, unfortunately. So I tried to get referred, and I got accidentally referred for an ADHD assessment, something I was curious about, but I thought, I don't have that. And I just paid for an autism assessment, and they said, it's inconclusive. You have traits, but there's other things in the way we can't. And I felt quite upset, because having come back from all that traveling, I thought, this is where the answers are. I want a sense of belonging. I want a sense of acceptance, and I bundled it into this thing. Very soon after that, I was diagnosed with ADHD, which I hadn't fully understood at the time. But what is this? And looking into it, I thought, okay, this looks like a lot of my younger years, my 20s, bouncing around. Then I've been successful. But through that journey, realizing that actually that came at a cost. And a lot of those things about never feeling good enough or never feeling like anything was enough, not being able to be present, being restless, that dopamine deficit, always needing stimulation, always needing something new, always chasing, and never just being able to just sit with what I had. I was thinking about always wanting, but not being happy with having. Or as soon as
a bit like the travelling around and not really, seeing the environment, just
that's it.
Worrying about what's next. It must have answered a lot of questions for you.
It really did, and I think being diagnosed with ADHD and then being able to look back on a recent history of 30,000 photos and videos, 18 months of travel, and looking back through that and thinking, this all fits, this all makes sense. Like this is textbook ADHD. So many things about, we sort of have like a motor that's always running, just constantly being driven, not being able to stop. And as I start reading about ADHD, beyond the sort of the memes of being distracted or disorganized, or all of those things, but some of the deeper symptoms of overly sensitive to rejection, to the point that you won't even try something, and all of that, and I start to realize, okay, this is starting to fit now. A lot of unresolved childhood issues. I had a difficult childhood, and I put a lot down to, you know, I'm like this because of X from childhood, and also this Y from childhood, and this Z from childhood, all of that. And those things did happen, but as I'm trialing ADHD medication, which is meant to control the symptoms, some of these things are completely disappearing, and I'm thinking I've spent thousands of pounds on therapy over the years, and I've understood these things intellectually, but emotionally I haven't processed any of this, and now magically it's gone? So this was ADHD all along? I'm looking on the side of the bottle, trying to check if it says it cures childhood trauma, and it doesn't. So I'm not saying that therapy is no good. It's a combination of the work was done already, but the blocker needed to be removed. And so that journey really helped bring into focus recent history and a lot of the past, and being able to let go and move on, and then enter a phase of sort of retraining the nervous system. So now testing if these things, if I was overly sensitive to criticism or rejection before, or if I couldn't face things head on, if I was avoidant, if I was relying on coping mechanisms. So that's the thing I realized about the years of being successful. It was all built on heavily masking, hiding a lot of the ways in which I felt I wasn't good enough, or that need for control. Even in my personal life, having in my calendar things like do laundry, and I'm only realizing afterwards, on this journey, as I'm letting go of the control and being more comfortable, like with the travel and planning document, like I wouldn't need that now. Just enough structure is enough. Realizing that, who puts do laundry in their calendar? Like, when you need to do laundry, the basket's full. It tells you, you look at it, right. And it's funny, but, I'm realizing that all of this chaos and disorganization, it was all overcompensated by a tremendous need for control. And so, of course, I wouldn't think I was ADHD. And I've spoken to other people since I became an ambassador with the charity, and I've been supporting people directly through their own journeys. I've met a lot of supposedly high-functioning, heavily masking people that are holding it together, but behind the scenes, it comes at this tremendous cost. It's energy that's expended in just being able to function, and then people normalize it and they wrap stories around it. This is unlike this because childhood something, or this is just the way it is for everyone. It's not. And I think one of the most difficult things for me, but I find with other people as well, is when they realize that it didn't need to be that hard. There's a real sense of grief and a real sense of regret, but eventually, a sense of relief and joy that you can live life, and it's not as hard as it was when you get the right support and the right treatment, but you have to go through that part of it when you realize that, yes, you walked around with a backpack full of bricks your whole life and you didn't need to. Well, there are ways. You could have got help. Well, that's the journey I went on. And then finally I got my autism diagnosis as well, but by that point I didn't need it. Because I didn't need belonging or acceptance. I'd found that all within myself and within people. So that's been the whole journey, the last 3 years of 100,000 words, writing a book, making no sense, going off around the world for 18 months, coming back, going on this journey of healing and self-rediscovery and reintegrating, reinventing myself. And then very recently, in the last 2 or 3 months, realizing decisions like that role I took. But if I did want to be involved in shape and direct something, I have no qualms taking on something in leadership now. And I deeply care about a lot of issues. I'm purpose-driven, so this is not a question of just finding a job. So all I can do is really send signals and plant seeds, see what comes back, see what grows.
Part of leading people.
It's part of leading people. Yeah.
You're talking about your understanding of your level of need for control. And one of the things that I do in my coaching is use a tool called FIRO-B. One of the elements of that is evaluating your level of need for control. It's an expressed or a wanted need, and I'm a person in a leadership role that also needs to be in control, and quite a lot of other leaders do. So you've been talking quite a lot about thought leadership and thinking about what you might do next and how you might leverage that, those leading thoughts and your self-awareness and self-understanding. Where do you think you're going to place yourself? This is about leaders on their journey to success. What does the next success look like for Himal?
So one of the changes I've gone through has been an increase in my own nervous system safety has resulted in a decrease in anxiety, which has resulted in an increase in confidence. And confidence is just the sort of inverse of anxiety, really, when you feel secure and supported. But also my need for control has gone down to, it fluctuates, but it's really gone down, and I don't really have much of a need for control anymore at all. And I'm increasingly sort of living without putting reminders for trivial things. Yeah, a lot of this is just having a great deal of trust and just faith in myself and people in my life and all the things I'm trying to do. So that opens up a lot of possibilities. In terms of where I see myself, in the 3 years I've done lots of volunteering, and more recently I was supporting the founder of a social enterprise, coaching. And I've been coaching, sort of mentoring people through their own ADHD and autism journeys as well, because I've been sharing my story openly and I've connected with people as a result. Very recently, because I've just seen how fragmented ADHD support and care is in the UK, maybe just England alone, there's an opportunity to bring something together, a join-up between policy and delivery. It's taking a lot of those user-centered approaches that I saw in government and applying them to this space. So you could take a start small approach, test and learn a bit, see what works, and tackle some of those pain points. Maybe just pull on things like long waiting lists in just one region and go from there. But really what you're trying to do is you're trying to increase the feedback loops between the people that are affected and the people that are there to provide the solutions. So you get something that's co-designed and longer term, this is broader than just ADHD, and it's broader than, this isn't about digital services really, this is much more than that. So I've got some ideas around that, and what I'm doing is I'm pulling, I put a piece out there, and that's draws some people have stepped forward to say we'd love to volunteer to help out. So I'm pulling a bit of a team together just to show what might be possible. Just some ideas, just some systems thinking, just some design, not setting any expectations, because what I'm really interested in is building credibility, getting access, to have conversations with policymakers to pull some levers on this to create a start small approach. And so that's great, and that's a space that I'd love to see grow and evolve and be a part of shaping and leading, but a lot of that's not down to me. So that's something I'm throwing myself into and developing, but in terms of what else? Coaching, consulting, advisory positions, but it has to align with my values. It has to be something that I feel like I can have an impact on. I'm making some difference in the world. Yes, there are. I'm fortunate enough to not have to worry about paying the bills just now, and I can go have some runway on that. But at some point, I will have to. I'm not set up for life, but I'm set up pretty comfortably. But what that means is, especially given where I've come from, I especially really keenly appreciate that there's a real privilege in the position I have right now. And I made a little short video for my Instagram a while ago about how being purpose-driven is it's a double-edged sword. So there's a privilege, but there's also a responsibility. I could very easily, chat to some people and get some role as a technology consultant of some sort, but I need something that interests me. I need something that what are we doing it for? What good does it do in the world? Or what value does it deliver? And maybe we don't even need to bring morality into it. What exciting, innovative, new thing are we bringing about? Right? It has to feel tangible. It has to feel like there's an element of creativity to it. And it can be difficult to put into words because for me, it's a conversation. And then something will grab me, and I'll feel like I can help be a part of this. I can help deliver this.
Of course, while you can, that's great because it's giving you feedback all the time. It's allowing you to feel like you're making a difference in the world, I suppose.
Right, because the thing is, I don't think I've ever had a job in my life. With the definition of a job, I know some people that have a sort of healthy compartmentalization with their work is their work and their life is their life. And their work, their job, it ends at 5 o'clock and they do that to pay the mortgage or to pay rent and for their lifestyle. And it may be something they enjoy. I'm not saying it's something they endure. It's something, but it's very much seen as I don't really have that separation. There's 3 years. There's 3 years time on. It's not time off. The book I wrote, I'll pick that up and finish it. I have the missing piece now. Missing piece was the neurodivergence, the ADHD and the autism. It does all make sense now. Everything else I did in that time, the travels, none of it is. It's all work, and it's a lot of work. And I'm working right now with the proposal I put out for, the policy and service reform around how we do ADHD in the country. The team I'm pulling together, that's all work. It just doesn't happen to be paid work. But I'm open to things that are going on. I'm open to hearing about interesting things, and I'm very ready to get involved in anything people want to chat to me about.
And if viewers or listeners want to find out a little bit more about what you're doing on the ADHD neurodivergence front, how would they contact you? LinkedIn or?
LinkedIn, yeah. So I've been putting a lot of material out there around this, and what I'm planning to do with this. So I put the original proposal out there a couple of weeks ago. But what I'm planning to do with this ADHD proposal is to work in the open. So if I can get the sort of volunteer team off the ground that's coming together right now, whatever we produce, whatever our thinking, all of that, it'll be published out. It'll be put on LinkedIn. It'll be put on. Wherever else we can put things out there, because the intention very much is to show the art of the possible, to move the needle on this. And then on LinkedIn, I'm increasingly writing about psychological safety, servant leadership, thought leadership, where it intersects with neurodivergence, but it's not just neurodivergence. But I've got some ideas around a longer piece I'm thinking of writing around how neurodivergent people can be the pioneers in your organization, being hyper-focused and trailblazing, how they can be the canaries in the coal mine, being hypersensitive and hyper-vigilant. But if your organization is not particularly safe, they're going to be focused on internal threats rather than warning you about the external risks, where there'd be fantastic early warning systems. And how servant leaders, who may also be neurodivergent, essentially are quest givers. They set the vision of the what and the why of what you're trying to do in the organization, but they'll let people figure out the how and sort of give quests to people, and people go off and then figure out that thing. And that's the longer piece that I'm bringing together, and I'm hopefully going to be putting out pretty soon.
Sounds fascinating. So if you had a message for business leaders now in organizations that are large or small, and understanding the journey that you've been on, what you've understood about yourself and your own self-experiences, what would that message be?
I think the main thing is just to genuinely look at the level of safety in your workforce and in your teams, right? Just see whether people, recently I was thinking in terms, sort of oversimplified this in my mind as a checklist. So think in terms of these 3 A's of authenticity. Are people turning up as their real selves? Can they bring their whole selves to work? Agency. Do they have a say in the bigger picture? Can they influence the bigger picture of the organization? Do they feel safe to speak up? And autonomy. Can they decide how they do their work? Can they decide timings, pacings, what works best for them? Or at least at the team level. And I think looking at those 3 things and trying to get real answers can really help figure out where the blockers in your organization are. Because psychological safety is not just a thing about well-being or morale. It directly feeds the delivery of value. It directly feeds innovation. when we talk about all these things like inclusion and diversity, that's actually about people being uninhibited. You can look at any number of studies that show that when people don't feel safe, their creativity and their critical thinking is compromised. So you're just hiring lines on the CV rather than human beings. It's a lot of wasted potential there. So I think those are really things that are worth looking into. Authenticity, agency, autonomy, how safe people feel. Yeah, and on a continuous basis. You don't just do a check-in once a year. It's something you need to really be open about. That's the work of culture.
Amazing. And culture is so important.
You can't buy it.
No. It's something leaders find it very difficult to really develop within an organisation. And you know, hopefully this has been some lessons for some businesses and to help them on their journey. It's been absolutely fascinating having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us. Really brilliant. If people want to talk to Himal, look you up or link, connect to you, then obviously on LinkedIn is the place to go. More exciting podcasts coming very soon, but for now, from the Barbican Centre, thank you, Himal. Absolutely amazing.
Thank you, Mike.